Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the noise articles, research notes to bring you what really matters, helping you get informed fast. Today, we're diving into something really significant in India, a major Supreme Court judgment about Jammu and Kashmir. Our mission, to sort of unpack the history behind it, the big legal questions, what it actually means for people living there, and, the wider ripples for India's federal system. It's a lot, but we'll break it down.
Absolutely. And it's more than just a legal case, right? This is really a moment that's actively reshaping how governance works, that whole state-union relationship in, well, an incredibly diverse country. It touches on how India sees its own constitution, how it manages all that diversity. It's fundamental.
Right. So to really get the weight of this, we need to go back a bit. To August 5th, 2019, that's when the BJP-led government, Prime Minister Modi's government, made a huge move. They effectively revoked Article 370 of the Constitution. It felt sudden. Almost like a constitutional tremor overnight for many.
Yeah, and to feel that tremor, you need to know what Article 370 actually was before then. Essentially, it was this constitutional clause that gave Jammu and Kashmir, J&K, its own constitution, its own laws. And this wasn't just symbolic. It meant real autonomy over most internal things. The central government in Delhi handled defense, communications, foreign affairs, the big external stuff. Its history is key here, too. It came about after J&K acceded to India back in 1947, right after partition. It was meant to reflect the, unique way the region joined India, a kind of bridge acknowledging its distinct status.
Okay. And the way they revoked it, that mechanism. That's also a huge part of the story and, well, the controversy. They didn't go the usual route for changing the Constitution, which often needs, big majorities in Parliament. Instead, they used a presidential order to basically nullify the article. And then, straight after, Parliament passed a resolution. And this didn't just tweak things, it totally reorganized the state, split it into two union territories, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. And for anyone less familiar, a union territory, well, it's different from a state. It's governed more directly from the center, generally with less autonomy. So the big question that just exploded was, why was this way of doing it so contentious? Legally, politically, all of it.
Exactly. And that takes us straight into the core legal fights the Supreme Court had to deal with. The first big one is constitutional validity. The heart of it was this revocation actually allowed under the Constitution? Especially because, while Article 370 was called temporary, there was a catch. It said it could only be changed or removed with the consent of the state government. The J&K Constituent Assembly initially later interpreted as the state legislature.
Right. And that consent?
It wasn't obtained, not from the J&K Assembly, because, critically, the state was under president's rule or governor's rule, basically direct central control at the time. The assembly wasn't functioning. So you had these two really strong opposing views clash. Critics were saying, look, this is unilateral, it bypasses the state, it violates the whole spirit of federalism, that power-sharing idea. They felt it undermined democracy, basically taking power away from the state level without their say-so.
Okay. And the government side?
Their argument hung on that word, temporary. They said, look, it was always meant to be temporary, so revoking it was always constitutionally possible. They framed it as necessary for national integration, removing what they saw as a barrier, making J&K fully part of the one nation, one constitution idea, correcting an old anomaly, in their view.
Okay, so the validity was one major battleground. But you mentioned the how.
Yeah.
The procedure of revocation. That sounds like it was just as thorny.
Oh, absolutely. If anything, even more complex legally. The question here was, could the president just issue an order to scrap Article 370? Or did something this huge need a proper constitutional amendment, plus, crucially, the direct involvement in OPE from the J&K legislature?
Right.
Critics hammered this point. By putting J&K under central rule first, suspending the assembly, they argued the central government essentially created a situation where it could give itself consent. The presidential order used the governor, who's appointed by the center, to stand in for the state legislature's consent. Opponents called that, well, a kind of constitutional sleight of hand, a legal fiction almost. Yeah, so these tricky legal details, interpreting what consent means when a state assembly isn't sitting, what the president's powers are in this specific context. That's what the Supreme Court was wading through. It really shows you how complex interpreting a constitution can be, especially with federalism and autonomy involved.
Okay, so we've got the history, the legal nuts and bolts, the constitutional arguments. But let's bring it down to earth. For you listening, and for millions in J&K, what did all this actually mean? What was the impact on the ground?
That's the vital question, isn't it? Because these big legal shifts always hit people's lives. In terms of impact on residents, the concerns were immediate and pretty serious. Legally, socially, think about it. Revoking Article 370 also meant scrapping Article 35A, which flowed from it. That article gave J&K residents special privileges like exclusive rights to own land and get government jobs there. Suddenly, those protections were gone. So, people from other parts of India could now, theoretically, buy land, apply for jobs. That caused a lot of anxiety locally about demographic change, economic competition, losing that unique status. And beyond the legal stuff, the immediate aftermath. Well, it was tense. There was significant political unrest, protests. The government's response was heavy security measures, communication blackouts, internet, phones shut down for extended periods, restrictions on movement, leaders detained.
Yeah, I remember the headlines.
Right, and the government cited law and order, security needs. But these actions raised huge human rights concerns, both in India and internationally. It made daily life very difficult and uncertain for a long time.
And zooming out a bit from the immediate personal impact, the political consequences,
Yeah.
they've been massive, right? This decision wasn't quietly accepted across the board.
Not at all. The political landscape got instantly polarized, even more than usual. The debate is incredibly sharp. On one side, you have many people, especially supporters of the government, who see this as essential. A step towards fully integrating J&K, ending separatism, boosting development, bringing it into the national mainstream. One nation, one constitution, that's the mantra.
Right, the integration argument.
Exactly. But on the other side, you have many others, political parties, civil groups, many people within J&K and elsewhere who see it completely differently. They view it as undermining regional autonomy, breaking promises made historically when J&K joined India. They see it as overriding the rights and distinct identity of the people there.
So two completely opposing narratives about the same event.
Precisely. And it just highlights how these big legal moves, especially around identity and autonomy, always have these deep human and political layers. They echo way beyond courtrooms.
So connecting this to the really big picture, this judgment, it feels like it's not just about J&K or Article 370 anymore. What are the broader, farther-reaching implications here for India as a whole, for its whole system of governance?
That's a crucial point, because the ripples go far beyond Kashmir. First, think about constitutional law, how the Supreme Court interpreted things like temporary provisions, the president's powers in relation to states, especially under central rule. That sets a massive precedent. It could change how India interprets other constitutional provisions about federalism, about autonomy, about any special status given to other regions for historical or cultural reasons. It basically redraws the lines, potentially, for how flexible or rigid the Constitution is seen.
So it could impact other states?
Potentially, yes, or at least how the relationship between the center and states is understood legally. Second, there's political stability. This ruling will inevitably shape regional politics, obviously in Kashmir, but maybe also in other states with unique histories or demands for autonomy. It could fuel debates everywhere about center-state relations. Maybe some states push harder for autonomy. Maybe the center feels emboldened to push for more uniformity. It definitely shifts the dynamics of Indian federalism.
The federal balance again?
Exactly. Which leads to the third, maybe the most fundamental point. National unity versus federalism. This whole case forces a big conversation. How does India balance the need for national unity, for integration, with respecting the diverse identities and autonomies of its states, especially where historical agreements or special provisions exist? What does unity mean? Does it mean uniformity? Or can it coexist with deep diversity and autonomy? This judgment really pushes that question to the forefront.
So whatever the specifics of the ruling end up meaning in practice, it seems clear the Supreme Court's decision is going to be a landmark. It's going to shape India's federal future, state autonomy, and that whole complex relationship between J&K and the rest of India for years, maybe decades.
Without a doubt, it's not just about one article or one region. It probes the very foundations of how India governs itself, how it interprets its constitution, and how it holds together such incredible diversity. And maybe, the thought to leave listeners with is this. How do modern, diverse nations strike that balance between national unity and preserving distinct regional identities, historical pacts, federal principles, and maybe even more critically, what are the real long-term consequences for society when that balance gets significantly shifted? That's something worth thinking about long after our deep dive ends.
Absolutely. It really highlights that complex dance between law, autonomy, and the whole project of building and maintaining a nation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep funding, keep questioning. We'll catch you next time.